Good morning, Mr. Pretorius. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Agrizzi.
Morning, Chair.
Morning, Chair. Nice to see Honourable Chair again.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming back to assist the Commission.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, I know that certain things have happened which are in the public domain, and I just want to assure you that I was very concerned about certain things that happened, and I asked inquiries to be made, and I was assured that it was not connected with evidence that you were giving here, and I was assured that the processes of the Commission would be respected until it has finished its work. I was informed that the new Director of Public Prosecutions knew nothing about those things. I was very concerned, and I continue to be concerned that nobody should do anything that would discourage witnesses from assisting the Commission. I hope that going forward, no one who is supposed to be really supporting the Commission will do anything to discourage witnesses from coming forward. But I'm very grateful that despite everything, you are here and you still want to assist the Commission.
Chair, thank you very much. It's been a long road and we anticipated it, but we're here to help.
Yes. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope that more people who have information, crucial information, will be encouraged to do the right thing, to come and assist this Commission, because what it is looking into is such an important project and issue for the whole nation. And I think I will be stating the obvious if I say that there can be no doubt that there are many people throughout the country who would not like this Commission to succeed, but there are many people in the country who support this Commission. And I believe that those who support the Commission will actually prevail, and that all of us must remain undeterred in doing the right thing. And I really thank you for coming forward again.
It's my pleasure, Chair, and you're 100% right. We've got to do this for the next generation, for our grandchildren and for their children's children.
Yes.
We have to look after this beautiful country.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Pretorius?
Thank you, Chair. May Mr. Agrizzi be sworn?
Yes, thank you.
Please state your full name for the record.
My name is
Please state your full name for the record.
My name is Angelo Agrizzi.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
None whatsoever.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Most definitely.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
Mr. Agrizzi, before you have a supplementary statement which has been attested to by you. At page 60, is that your signature?
Sorry, Mr. Advocate Pretorius, just let me get there. Yes, that is.
Just for the record, Chair, this is Exhibit S9. And from pages 1 to 60...
Yes, I'm sorry. So let's properly put on record, because it's not a previous one that we used, isn't it, the exhibit? It's a new statement.
Yes.
In other words, are we continuing with an exhibit number that we used before, or should
Well,
we
this
be
is the
having
same exhibit number
that we used
series
before?
that we used
Oh,
in respect
okay.
of his earlier evidence.
Okay, no, that's fine then.
So, Mr. Agrizzi, your supplementary affidavit, together with annexures, will be Exhibit S9. The supplementary affidavit from pages 1 to 60, is that true and correct?
That is true and correct.
Then may I ask, you made certain statements at the time you gave evidence originally, Mr. Agrizzi,
Yes.
in relation to the circumstances in which you came to give evidence. Is it correct that you've been made no promises of reward?
That is correct.
No incentives have been offered to you
That is correct, Chair.
in relation to the giving of your evidence?
Pretorius, I'm sorry. No, there was some noise coming from the SABC journalist here. I don't know if it was a cell phone or anything.
All right.
Will everybody please just switch off their cell phones? Okay, let's proceed.
Thank you, Chair. You've been offered no reward or incentive for testifying here today, Mr. Agrizzi,
Most definitely, I've not been offered any reward and incentive.
and you're not giving evidence under any form of compulsion.
Most definitely not.
And the evidence you're giving is being given freely and voluntarily.
Freely and voluntary, Chair.
Yes. I would just like to highlight, before you deal with the text of your affidavit, Mr. Agrizzi, two circumstances that are relevant to your giving evidence today. You should have before you Exhibit LL1. It hasn't been filed in the papers. Do you have that?
Let me have a
Does
look.
he have that?
Sorry. We would have found that. Sorry.
Chair, may I give you LL1?
I think somebody will bring you some document, yeah?
I thought I'd lost it.
Yes, thank you.
It's actually annexure LL1, Chair,
Oh, okay.
which will be put in the bundle.
At the end of the annexures in Exhibit S9.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
LL1 is a document, for want of a better word, that appears to be written in a form of Zulu, and LL2 is an attempt by the investigators at least to translate that document. Would you tell the Chair, please, about the circumstances in which the original of this document came into your possession?
I will. Chair, I don't always raise these issues, and I actually didn't. It was by chance. I've been very flippant about any threats and that type of thing.
Yes.
I've kind of taken it in my stride now, and I try not to make a big thing out of it, because otherwise my
Yes.
family get to hear about it. And unfortunately, I haven't briefed them on this yet.
Okay.
So they're going to hear it for the first time now. The problem is that if I start
Well,
making...
maybe, are you comfortable to talk about it before you talk to them, to your
Chair-
family, or are you...
Chair, I'm in trouble already with my wife. She's now watching this probably and saying, now come on, tell us. And if I
Yes.
don't say something now, my phone's going to start ringing. And you know what? I mean, Mr.
Okay.
Advocate Pretorius, with all due respect, has put me in a lot of trouble right now.
Yeah.
But it's fine. He was in a meeting where I actually was in trouble last week for not picking her up at the airport
Yeah.
on time.
Okay, all
So,
right.
Chair, so I get a lot of these things. I get missed calls, I get funny numbers, I get put onto these Facebook groups and a lot of that. So I came out of breakfast one morning at Nickelway and I found this on my windscreen. What I've learned to do is to throw them away. But this specific one, I crumpled up and I thought, no, let me just keep this. And I called the guys who washed the cars there, and I asked them if they saw, and they said, no, they didn't see anything. And it so happened that Mr. Dutton was meeting me with Patrick at the advocate's offices. And I said to them, by the way, can you interpret this for me? And I gave it to them, and that's probably why it's there. But, I've learned, I take it in my stride now, I accept it. And yes, it's going to happen. And I've been cautioned, I've been told that perhaps maybe I should take these things more seriously, which I will.
Yes.
So thank you, Advocate Pretorius, for creating...
We did, however, discuss this in preparation for your evidence, but
Yes.
I don't want to
That's fine.
go there for the moment. The second incident was discussed with you that I would like to place on record.
Yes.
It's in the public interest, and the legal team believes in your interests as well.
I have discussed that with my family.
Last night, members of the investigation team...
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. I'm still trying to understand this LL1 and LL2. Okay, no, that's fine. There might be a need for a relook at the translation.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
It's an attempt
Yeah,
to translate, and in very general terms,
yeah,
it does appear to be a threat that was placed on Mr. Agrizzi's windscreen in a parking lot with reference to
it certainly is a threat.
his mother and a statement to the effect that we know what car you drive.
Yeah,
But perhaps a more accurate translation
yes,
and commentary on the type of language used.
yes.
Doesn't seem to be used, I'm told, by a pure Zulu speaker.
Yeah. One translation might be the one that is given in LL2. Another translation might be that they were saying he must stop talking about state capture and talk about Bosasa
Yes.
only.
Yes.
So
Well, that appears clear from
yeah,
at least the attempted translation, but a better translation may be provided.
yes, yeah, okay, no, that's fine. Thank you.
The second incident, which the legal team believes should be placed on record and made public, is last night the investigators received a message from a very senior police officer saying that your life was under threat, and this was on reliable information. You're aware of that?
I was told last night.
Yes. And as a result of that, further security was provided.
Correct.
Notwithstanding those threats, you're still willing to give evidence today.
Most definitely, Chair.
In your evidence during January this year, Mr. Agrizzi, certain questions were raised by the Chair, and other questions arose during the course of evidence which you've asked leave to deal with in your evidence. Your evidence, therefore, will cover two aspects. Firstly, a response to questions raised by the Chair and other questions which arose during the course of your original testimony. The second part of your evidence will deal with new matters that you wish to place before the Chair.
Correct, Chair.
If we may go then to page 2 of the statement, paragraph 2. During the course of your evidence, you referred to, amongst other people, a Mr. Sisinya Siopela and a Fana Hlongwane. Do you recall that?
That's correct.
And the question was raised whether, at the time the contract between the Post Office and Bosasa was entered into, whether either Mr. Siopela or Mr. Hlongwane had any direct links or influence with the post office. Do you recall that?
That's correct, Chair.
What is the position? Or what
Chair-
was the position?
Chair, the position is very simple, is that Senior Siopela did not have any links with the post office at that stage. The only reason I mentioned Fana Hlongwane was because the senior worked for Fana Hlongwane on the arms deal. In terms of Siopela, he was employed by African Global or Consilium, one of the two companies, to basically chase up ministerial leads and to make sure that Bosasa and the African Global group of companies kept their associations healthy in terms of political and economic well-being with the ANC.
You also gave evidence of a system crash or server crash, and you were asked whether you had a screenshot of the communication that was sent to Bosasa employees.
That is correct.
What is the position in that regard?
Chair, I basically have given my assistance in terms of my laptops, my iPads, everything I've given over to the Commission and the investigators, sorry. And I still haven't got the screenshot, but what we did manage to get was a report, sorry. We got a report from Johnny Wilkinson from a forensics lab that's accredited that I had done years ago to provide to the Commission to show that there was indeed a crash and there was indeed information lost on the server itself. Now, originally, we prepared that report as a defense, and it's reflected in Annexure EE.
Well, let's go to Annexure EE, because there has been evidence not about this crash, but other crashes. The document that you referred to, prepared by Johnny Wilkinson, appears at page 63.
Yes,
Is that the document you referred to?
that is the document, yes.
It appears on the face of it to have been prepared by Johnny Wilkinson, Imperative Technology,
That's correct.
and on the 18th of February 2011.
That's correct.
That's under the head Document Distribution, Chair, on page 63.
Yes, I've got it.
Please tell the Chair the circumstances which gave rise to the production of this report.
Chair, basically what happened was we had a meeting, I don't know if you recall in my very first affidavit where I said we had the meeting with Advocate Lawrence Hodes, and then we had to go downstairs with Gavin Watson, and he said you must destroy the evidence and all that type of thing. Well, emanating from that meeting, we basically needed to do a report on, amongst other things, the server crash. So if you go to page, I'll tell you now, sorry, if you go to page 75.
Yes.
Okay, that basically gives you the scope of the server crash.
If we could go to page 76, it's described in detail there.
That's correct.
That's if our pagination matches. Under the heading Background, do you see that?
That's right.
And the report reads, the My Documents user files volume of the file server failed on Thursday, 8 November 2007, around 2000.
That's
Is that
correct.
in fact a reference to the crash?
That's correct.
And then in the second paragraph, it reads, an attempt was made to recover data from backup tapes. This operation proved to be unsuccessful due to backup procedures having failed for a period of time as a result of the volume being too full to run successful backups. The success rate of the recovery was estimated at around 30%.
That is correct, Chair.
Can you confirm from your own knowledge, firstly, that there was a file server failure or crash, and secondly, that resulted in approximately 70% of the data on the servers being lost?
Chair, I can attest to the fact that the crash was, in other words, manipulated. It did happen, but I can also attest to the fact that the data that was lost, we've actually provided the Commission with the hard drives of that data before it was lost. And obviously, you can go into it and have a look at it.
Yes. Would you just remind the Chair, please, of those events? There was an instruction that a crash should occur, as I recall your evidence.
That's correct, Chair.
Notwithstanding that, steps were taken by yourself and perhaps others to preserve data.
That is correct, Chair.
What were those steps?
The steps was my instructions to Leon van Tonder was to make a backup and double up on the server and keep it safe so that if we needed the information going forward, we had the information.
And then the final paragraph under the...
I'm sorry, this was now way back in 2007?
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. And your thought that you might need the information was it connected with what subsequently happened in 2017, 28, and so on? In other words,
Chair, sometimes...
did you envisage then that there could come a time in the future when you might need that information for the present purposes, or purposes connected with whatever gave rise to the parting of the ways between you and Mr. Governor Watson?
Chair, sometimes, sorry I interrupted you, but sometimes you do things, you know you're not supposed to be deleting this, but sometimes you get this little voice that tells you, listen, just step back a bit. And the funny thing was, Leon confirmed it to me as well. He said, Angelo, let's rather make a copy here. It just shows you, sometimes you just got to listen. And that little voice tells you that's to do it. It's the same with the video recording of the cash in the vault. The little voice tells you, just make a recording. I can't explain it.
Yes.
There was no, at that stage, there was just do it. And I instructed Leon to do it.
At that stage, the relationship was good, was
No
fine.
problem.
There was no problem.
No problem. As a matter of fact, there was just a couple of news reports.
Yes.
Nothing. We didn't even know that the problems would escalate in that.
Yes.
I just had an inclination. But interestingly enough, the 70% of the data was the data regarding the tenders of DCS.
Thank you.
The final paragraph under the head background reads, the disaster was declared and all heads of department were informed during a meeting held in the data center at 0900 on the 9th of November 2007. Concerns were raised and possible recovery mechanisms were discussed. Is it correct then that whether by way of a circular or a screenshot or a data message, the employees, or the senior employees at least of Bosasa, were informed of the crash?
Chair, that is correct. In actual fact, there is a document that I personally authored and put out with the IT department to notify everybody and to put a contingency plan and a risk aversion plan in place. I cannot get hold of that document. Unfortunately, as you know, some of our witnesses have been assaulted and frog-marched and that, so it's very difficult to get it.
Then on page 77 is another document. It appears to be an email to Bosasa from Cobus Smith, and it states, Dear Johan. Who is the Johan?
Johan Fourie is one of the IT coordinators in a senior position.
And who was Cobus Smith?
Cobus Smith was a supplier. At that stage, the company was using Datacentrics, and he was the liaison for the company from Datacentrics.
In any event, he says, it is with regret that I have to inform you that we cannot perform a data recovery on your RAID, RAID 5 set due to 2 hard drives having failed simultaneously. According to our data recovery specialists, it is impossible to rebuild the RAID set if 2 drives fail. Was that the position to the knowledge of Bosasa and its employees at that time?
That is correct.
That document is dated the 9th of November 2007. Is there anything else in regard to the server crash or the servers crash that you want to tell the Chair about?
Not at this stage, no. I know that there was one plan, but I think we cover that in the affidavit itself.
Let's go back then to your statement at paragraph 4. Questions were raised by the Chair, and questions arose in any event about the volume of cash that was being dealt with in the vault of Gavin Watson for distribution. Would you tell the Chair, please, what the minimum amount was at any one time in the safe or safes or in the vault, and what the maximum amounts were at any one time?
So, Chair, to answer the question simply, it was 2 million was the minimum amount that we'd have to have in the vault. And the maximum was about 6.5 million, but it went over that. How I knew it was 6.5 million was because there were three safes. When you packed the 2 safes full, that was 6.5 million. And normally that's the capacity it would take, depending if it was 100 or 200 rand notes. But mostly it was 100 and 200 rand notes. And it would go over that over certain periods of time in the year. I think it was 2014, I think it went over that, over the Christmas period, because bonuses get paid out to directors and that type of thing.
Right. So, as I understand your evidence, at any one time there would be a minimum amount of 2 million rand in cash available for distribution.
Correct.
But at certain times, that amount would increase to 6.5 million rand or more.
Sometimes much more, yeah.
Depending on the time of the year and the requirements.
That's correct, Chair. So especially over the December period, it would happen in November, because you would try and get the cash in November, because in December everybody went away. So it would normally pump up in, I'd say, November rather, and then towards the beginning of December.
You said a few minutes ago that during the December period, the amounts could be higher because of bonuses that needed to be paid. And you mentioned directors of the company.
Yes.
Where the bonuses of directors of Bosasa companies also paid out of the cash that was there, where they paid in cash, not in normal way that one would expect?
No, they were paid in cash over December especially.
Yeah.
There were sometimes that they put through a bonus on the payroll, but normally it was 200,000-300,000 rand in cash over December per person.
Yes, you probably know why.
Sorry?
You probably know why it was thought they should be paid in cash in terms of their bonuses. The directors.
Because it was a tax duck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Then in paragraph 5, Mr. Agrizzi, you deal with the frequency, how often the safes would be refilled, and how the logistics worked in relation to monies coming in and monies going out. Would you tell the Chair about that, please, as you deal with in paragraph 5 of your statement?
Chair, I don't want to actually, last time I read from my statement, I actually don't want to. I want to tell you as it is. Okay?
Yes,
So I might,
yes.
Sorry, Advocate Pretorius, I might get the order not exactly the same as we did in the statement, but
Yes.
to cut it really frankly, what was happening was there was bulk deliveries happening at one stage. So there was, every week there would be a delivery of 2.6 to 3 million rand around there. But then I started getting concerned, and what happened then was it was changed to a weekly delivery, which was about between 900,000, 1.2 million. Sometimes it was more. It all depended, because what would happen is Andries van Tonder would go to Gavin on a Monday morning and then say to Gavin, listen, how much do you need? And Gavin would say, well, X amount. And then Andries would phone up Greg, Lake and Allen and say, order me 1.5 tons of chicken. And that's how it would happen. So that was normally the amounts ordered at a time.
Then once the money or the cash had been received, what would then happen?
Well, when the cash was received, there was a reconciliation process. The cash would then be taken into the company secretary vault, where there was a safe. I would have to double check it, and Andries van Tonder would have to double check it. Then we'd reconcile it. There would be normally a piece of paper. I mean, I didn't keep them all, but I did keep one or two. And then we'd hear when Gavin is available, and then the cash would be transported to the main vault, to Mr. Watson's vault, and from there it would be packed, and he would count it sometimes. Sometimes they wouldn't count it, but you saw on the video.
It was a matter raised very briefly in preparation for your evidence, Mr. Agrizzi,
Yes.
but do you recall, and if I take you by surprise, my apologies, and we can consider whether you deal with it later, but you recall the evidence of Mr. Greg Lawrence?
Chair, I saw it briefly, and yeah, I do recall it.
Well, just one point in regard to that evidence, if you need time to think about it, that's in order. He appeared to have a lack of memory, to put it mildly, in regard to the amounts of cash delivered to Bosasa. Do you have any comment on that?
I do. Chair, I know Greg Lawrence for many, many years. As a matter of fact, Greg Lawrence, I got to come to the commission through another friend because I wanted him to come clean. But, you know, the funny thing is that what happened was, a day before the testimony, Greg Lawrence and another acquaintance flew down, and you can check SAA records and Airlink records. They flew down to Durban to see Mr. Greg Lake and Allen from Equal Trade. And when he came back here, he had a sudden lapse of memory. And he only showed you certain videos, or maybe he showed you more, I don't know. But I can't understand, well, I can understand the lapse of memory, Chair. But I think if you check I'll give the investigators the name of the other person. If you check the flight plans and SAA tickets and Comair tickets, I'm sure you pick them up. And then ask the relevant questions on why did you travel down there and why did you come back. Unfortunately, because it's so big, witnesses do get interfered with.
Yes.
In relation to the amounts that he would have delivered, to your knowledge, can you help the Commission?
Yes.
What amounts would he have delivered, to your knowledge, to Bosasa?
Well, there would be, that specific one delivery that I did see was 900,000 Rand, he said. And the following week he was bringing another R1 million, or the following Monday, if I recall correctly. But no, the amounts were sometimes 2.8 million Rand, 3 million Rand. But I must just add there, Andries van Tonder would collect those. They were never delivered to Bosasa. Andries van Tonder would collect them at Lanseria. There's a petrol station, because I attended once with him just to assess the risk. And we can take you there and show you, but we can show you in the payments to Equal Trade exactly how much was delivered. We can, that information is available.
So, as I understand your evidence, without going into too much detail, the amounts would have run into several millions.
Yes, most definitely, Chair.
And sometimes several million at a time.
Correct, Chair. If I can add.
Yes.
Chair, if we want to clean up, we have to be honest. We don't need to protect each other. We don't need to protect. We have to be honest. Otherwise, where are we going? And I must tell you, I don't think he was being completely honest.
Then you were asked, Mr. Agrizzi, about the directors and shareholders of Diambu and Bosasa at the time you were first employed.
Yes.
Obviously, it would be too difficult for you personally to trace the directorships over the whole period of your employment. But to the best of your recollection, would you tell the Chair who were the directors of Diambu, which later became Bosasa, and who were the shareholders at the time you were employed? And remind us, please, when were you first employed?
8th of May 1998 or 9. I can't remember.
Okay. Tell the Chair, please, who those persons were.
Chair, when I was first employed, the original interview happened with Danny Mansell, and I was then told he's a 50% shareholder, and I was then introduced to Gavin Watson, who was a 50% shareholder, and then I met with, I think it was Vivi Messina, who was apparently a director, a guy by the name of Tabani Mgomezulu, who came from the mines. He was a union shop steward, and he had joined, a nice fella, he had joined from NUM into Bosasa, and he was instrumental in doing the marketing on the mines. And there was a gentleman, a thin gentleman by the name of Wellington in Chanka, who passed away. There was a gentleman by the name of Temba Snyman. There was a lady by the name of Lindy Gous. There was, I can't remember. I think I'll have to look at my notes because
No, that's fine.
No, that was it.
Yeah.
And Temba Snyman, unfortunately, has passed away
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
And the shareholders were
Gavin Watson, Danny Mansell.
50% each.
Yes.
In any event, you can confirm that, to the best of your recollection, the persons listed in 6.1 of your supplementary affidavit were indeed those directors
Correct, yeah.
and shareholders.
Correct, Chair.
Then you were also asked, Mr. Agrizzi, approximately how many employees and officials, and that is government employees and officials, would have received regular bribes. And this would be an average over a period of time.
Yeah, and Chair, unfortunately, you know, memory is what it is when you get to my age. I remember 38. I remember counting on a list 38. And how I remember it is because one of the pages that I use in one of my writing pads has got 38 lines, and it was a full page. And that's, I remember, 38.
Okay.
Who decided who would receive cash?
Chair, it's very simple. Gavin Watson was the ultimate decision maker. He would decide. So what would happen is a director, like, let's say, Sibian Dlamini, would come to me and say, you know, Angelo, we've got to work with Mama X, because Mama X can influence Mr. D, who can sign off on Mr. C. So what do you think? And I'd say to the person, well, what are you talking, how much money are you talking here? And they'd start off normally with 200,000 Rand. It was a favorite number. And then I'd say, no, but let's look at this realistically, even if we have the contract. So the reason why they would come to me is I would know more or less how much profits each contract would make. So I would be able to say, listen, this is totally ridiculous. You can't have an installation like the commission for 10 million Rand, but you want to pay out 9 million Rand in bribes. So I would have to do that analysis for Gavin. But ultimately, I would have to then go with that information to Gavin Watson. He would decide. I had no jurisdiction on deciding you may pay somebody X or Y. I wasn't liked because I'd always cut them down, cut them down, cut them down. So I would be able to give advice, but ultimately your decision maker would be the director and Gavin Watson on who gets paid the bribes.
Are you able to say whether most of the time your recommendations in terms of amounts were accepted by Mr. Gavin Watson?
No, he wouldn't, on certain of them, he wouldn't give me feedback on it.
Oh,
But I wouldn't say a recommendation. Like I remember, for instance, asking a question, why are we paying a certain person R1 million a month? How on earth do we do it? And I was told, no, but he's looking after other people. Now, that decision I never made. I was never party to that. But I was asked my advice. You know, when I heard the amount, I thought it was ludicrous. But my decision, I wouldn't say that my recommendations would be accepted. I think the reason why I was always used first was to negotiate them down and then to, you know, go. So kind of, if I can explain it in layman's terms, It's like going to the shop in the plaza. You know, the first salesman comes and then they bring another salesman. So one salesman will say, no, you're going to pay for that 200 Rand. Then the other guy comes and he says, no, 150 Rand. Don't worry about him. So you feel very happy. And I think that was the same type of tactic that was being used by Gavin, is to get me to cut them down to the bone, but ultimately he'd make the decision.
Okay.
You kept records in your system about which you've testified. That system reflected in, amongst other documents, the black books.
Yes.
Was that a complete record of monies going out, or did you conclude that there must have been other monies to which you didn't account for?
You know, Chair, curiosity always gets the better of you. And I knew exactly how much I had signed off on and how much I had packed for the directors in their bags. And, but there was always like 2 million Rand, 1.8 million Rand, 2 million Rand over. And that would be left in the vault. But interesting, I didn't know who the other people were that were getting. You know, I don't know. So there was always this 2 million Rand discrepancy. But next week, you have to fill up the vault again, and there's nothing, and you've got to get it back to its order there. So that amount of money, I can't attest to. I don't know, you know, where it was used by Mr. Watt, but he was the only one who had keys for his vault, and for not for his vault, for the actual safes themselves.
I take it, nor could you say that that amount was used for bribes, if you didn't know what it was used for.
No, I don't know what it was used for. I find it hard to believe, Chair, that it wouldn't be anything but bribes, because you can't, I don't think Mr. Watson would have banked that money or used that money. I mean, I don't think anybody can use 2 million Rand a month.
Yes, that's a general observation you make on the basis of probabilities of which you were aware.
I don't want to make assumptions. Let me rather stick to, I don't know what happened to it.
All right. Then the question arose in relation to the evidence that you gave as to which companies were used to provide Bosasa with cash.
Okay.
And you were asked to list those companies, and you've done so in paragraph 8 of your statement. Would you tell the Chair, please, about those companies, or just name those companies?
So one of the companies was La Mozeste. That was not for cash predominantly, but for filtering, let's call it racketeering. One of the companies was Equal Foods. There's different derivatives of Equal Foods. There's Equal Food 4, there's Equal Food Trading, Equal Trade, all those type of derivatives. I can't, Chair, I literally walked out like as if I had nothing. I basically went home with my one book. So I didn't take copies of records or anything with me. I didn't have
But you
that.
mentioned here Equal Trade 4 Pty Limited and Equal Food Traders Pty Limited.
Correct.
Do you recall those
Yes,
companies?
I recall those.
Yeah,
But I'm saying there might be different derivatives that I can't remember.
Yeah, they appear. The list appears at page 6 of your
Yes.
statement at the top.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other one was the liquor outlets, which was liquor outlets and sales within Bosasa, because we had bars and canteens. The Lindela repatriation camp was another one I mentioned in my first affidavit. And then there was Rikele Construction that worked with the liquor store, in tandem with the liquor store, a gentleman by the name of Rian Huxma. And Rikele would fetch the money for us, we would pay them, and they would then take a percentage of that. And then there was AA Wholesalers in Lenasia that was used quite frequently for cash and also for racketeering, tax fraud, and that type of thing.
You then referred in your evidence previously to another method of generating cash, which did not necessarily involve the cooperation of an outside company. Perhaps you should just remind us very briefly of that method of generating cash.
In terms of the fraudulent invoices.
That was where BEE and SMME company
Okay.
payments were used, but without actually involving those companies,
Yeah.
where Bosasa would generate invoices, presumably for the payment of casual labor. Those would be paid in cash, but that cash would be used by Bosasa.
Carlos is a very astute accountant, and basically, between him and Jacques van Zyl, they picked up on a liquidations list, or they looked for the liquidations of companies in the newspapers and things like that, and then they would use those companies' names, or companies that were supplying us at one stage. One of them was Huetlo Events, where they were supplying us, and the stuff was going through the books, so it wouldn't raise flags for the auditors. And basically, false invoices were drawn up, cash checks produced, and if the auditors asked why they cash checks, then what would happen is you'd say, no, but they're BEE, and they need cash checks. As a matter of fact, that actually, I don't allude to it in the statement, but it reminded me when somebody sent me an email, there were 3 occasions where the auditors said, listen, you guys haven't got a clean audit. These are discrepancies in your audit. I think I provided the commission with 3 letters from Maseng Viljoen at that stage. So that's the system that was used, is writing up fraudulent invoices and then drawing cash checks. And this started to become a problem because the banks, everybody looks at it and says, but in your account, you've got over 4 million rand going in cash checks. So it was reported by Maseng Viljoen. We also had to deal with it, if I recall correctly, at Urba as well.
And that practice didn't continue for very long, did it?
When I found out about how it was happening, I actually went one day with them and I stopped it because it was too risky. I mean, they were sending accounts ladies to go and fetch 700,000 rand, 400,000, 500,000 rands cash.
That was a physical protection issue.
Yes, as well, and it was sticking out like a sore thumb.
That then relates to the question at paragraph 9. You've really dealt with that, unless you have anything to add. And that's the issue relating to casual workers and the use of the fictitious casual worker system to generate cash.
Okay, I can give that in a nutshell, Chair. Basically what happened was there was a lot of construction happening at the time. Rikele Construction was doing the construction, and at that stage they felt that the best way to get cash out was to use casual wages. And that was a time before the UIF changed the act and you had to register even casual workers with UIF. So they would draw up a spreadsheet on Excel and just add casual wages, 220 Rand per person per day. And you would work them for a month, and so you had 500 people on that payroll. It was an Excel spreadsheet. There was no deductions, nothing. It gets printed out, go to the bank, draw checks for that value, and say, oh no, this was casual wages. Chair, we had a rule in the company that everybody had to have a bank account because we only gave people wages on EFT, and that was a policy that I brought in 2002 already. So all these casual wages are easy to identify in the HR department because, number one, they won't reflect there, and number two, all you need to do is ask for the employment contracts for those people.
Yes.
That was the system used.
So in essence, cash would be paid to non-existent casual laborers. That cash would then come back to Bosasa for its own uses.
That's correct.
And in terms of time frames, what period are we talking about when we talk about the payment of the supposed payment of ghost employees, casual employees?
I think about a year, Chair. I think it was
between what period and what period, and what year and what year, if you are able to say?
I'd have to look.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Chair,
that's fine.
I can't actually remember.
You can't remember. And for how long do you think
it was? About 8 months a year.
Okay, over a number of years, or in a particular year?
No, it happened for 1 year.
Or in 1 year?
Between 8 months and a year.
Yes.
And then I got concerned about the safety aspect.
Yes.
I mean, we were having ladies collecting 700,000-800,000 rand at a normal bank and coming back to the office. Something was bound to go wrong. So we immediately stopped that.
Okay. So you can't remember the year, but it was a certain year, and during that year it went on for about 8 months, more or less.
You know, Chair, I'll be able to pick it up from the Mseng Viljoen report when we have a break. I will try and find the 2 letters that I provided, and it was highlighted there as well.
Yes.
That the amount of cash transactions is ridiculous.
Okay, thank you.
In paragraph 10, you answer the question raised by the Chair in relation to contracts that Bosasa obtained, that were awarded to Bosasa during certain periods.
Correct.
Please place those on records, if you would.
Okay.
On record.
Chair, do you have to mention every single contract? Because I might have slipped a few, forgotten a few.
No,
Or do you
well, just
want
mention the ones in your statement.
Yes, you can read them.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 1999 to 2002, there were the gold mines that started off with Kloof, Lebanon, Sasol, Randfontein Estates, Hartbeesfontein Gold Mine, Harmony Gold Mines in the Free State, Goedehoop Colliery, and Horizon Youth Centre in the Western Cape. Then in 2001 to 2004, we split it up because those were mostly security contracts. So we had the post office contract, which covered guarding at the various post offices, plus it covered the pension payouts, and then those were mostly predominantly security contracts.
And you
And
talk
then
about the airports company
Airports
as well.
company as well. It started off with Oliver Tambo. They had a problem with their car parks, and we got the contract awarded to us there. In 2004 to 2007 was correctional services. I remember mentioning to you before there was a training contract, which I never knew about. I was invited to the awards evening by Dr. Smith and by Mark Tavener, who was running it. I had the catering contract management at 7 management areas. Then we got the Sondola IT access control and CCTV contract, a Sondola IT television network system that we put into every single cell in every single correctional center. Then there was the Pezulu contract, which was for the fencing. And these all had maintenance contracts linked to them as well. So there was either a variation order or an extension on those contracts because of that. So the focus 2004 to 2007 was correctional services that gave us the growth. And then in 2007...
So I'm sorry, but simply looking at your statement under 2004 to 2007 and correctional services, so Bosasa had something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 contracts with correctional services, and you say most of the time each one of those had a maintenance contract in addition.
Or an extension.
Or an extension.
Correct.
Okay.
The last one, Chair, not 6, there's 5. The last one was various youth centers in the Northwest. I don't know why that's under correctional services heading, but
that should not be under correctional services.
I think the dates are, we shouldn't look at the label on the heading. We should look at only the dates.
Oh, okay. But that last one, various Northwest youth centers, falls outside of correctional services.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've grouped them in dates, not in actual sectors.
Okay.
Chair, and then in 2007, we did the very first guarding contract for the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. At that stage, it was all the rural areas guarding that we did successfully for them. And then we also did the various Limpopo youth centers as well.
So that too should not be connected with the Department of Justice.
That's an error on my part. I don't think we should have the label.
The headings.
It should be the years.
Yes. Well, of course, we do want to know who the contracts were with.
Yes.
Yes. So that's important.
Yes. No.
But under 2007 to 2010, The guarding security contract was with the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development.
Yes.
But the contract or contracts with various Limpopo youth centers was separate.
Department of Social Development.
Okay.
Okay. Can I continue,
Yes.
Chair?
Please continue.
In 2011 to 2016, there was a youth centre, Clan William Namakwa Youth Centre. There was a Department of Justice and Constitutional provision of access control, CCTV, and fencing, which started off for 101 courts nationally. So what it was an integrated system that had to be put in. It was being managed at that stage. The Department of Justice appointed the IDT to manage it, the Independent Development Trust to manage it, and they managed it on behalf of the Department of Justice. And there were 2 liaison people or 3 liaison people from Justice that would sit in on all the meetings. I only attended a few of the meetings, so I wasn't too clued up on that. And then there was the extension of the airports company as well, contracts to all the airports in South Africa. So we basically, at that stage, Bosasa basically managed every airport in South Africa, either on the air side or the land side, with the exception of the Polokwane Airport and Lanseria and those type of airports. But all your major hubs were managed.
Do I understand you correctly? You say that this is not necessarily a complete list.
Chair, you know, I'm working off memory, and memory sometimes fails.
Yes.
Which department would be involved in relation to the youth centres?
Department of Social Development.
And the contracts involving Lindela,
The Department of Home Affairs.
and that Lindela's, is that on the list here? I don't see it.
Now, Lindela's been a pre-existing contract for many, many years. What happened was Lindela was that we had a renegotiation process with Lindela. So I didn't include it here because that was a renegotiation on that contract.
But for the sake of completeness, in one or other category, we could add Lindela to this list.
Well, you could, but it was actually awarded. If you look at the heading, it says how many contracts were awarded to. So that's why I did not put Lindela in. Lindela was pre-existing.
Got me there.
Okay, sorry.
Then you were also asked to give the chair an estimate of the value or the approximate values of the contracts.
Chair, I've worked on an estimate because, and when I say an estimate, you probably find that it's within R1 million or 2 million rand. And the reason for that is I don't have any documentation. I walked out with nothing. So the Sibanya mines, if I remember correctly, the annual contract value was about 71 million rand per annum. Could have been a little bit more. Correctional services, I think, is pretty accurate. That was 580 million rand per annum.
Would you also, when you deal with these contracts, please, Mr. Agrizzi, just talk about the amount in the last column, the estimated annual bribes?
Okay. Sibanya Mines was about 3 million rand. You know, those were smaller union type things that we had to sort out. So it's about 3 million rand, worked out to about 280,000 rand per month, I think. Correctional services, I can only talk about the volume of cash going out. I can't talk about what the houses cost or that type of thing because I was never involved with that. I didn't know what cars were bought at what stage until only after 2007, I think, or 2008. So I can only tell you what was going on a normal basis. So let's say this is pay-as-you-go kind of thing. There's no better word to explain it. It was 15 million rand a year. And it sounds ridiculous. It's 15 million rand a year sounds like an astronomical figure, but remember, one person was taking out R1 million a month. So that gives you the impact of it. Corona was about 3.6 million rand per annum. The value of that contract was about 122 million rand.
You will deal with that
month.
contract specifically later in your evidence.
Yeah, I think we do deal with it. All right. If you look at Department of Justice, the total there was, it was a massive contract, 700 million rand, I think. It was about 16.5 million rand. It was paid out in cash. Access control and CCTV for corrections was about 241 million, and there was about 4.2 million paid out in bribes. In gratuities, the TV systems was about 300 million rand, and if I remember correctly, that was also about 5 million in gratuities. Pazulu fencing was about 800 million, and if I remember correctly, it was about close on 10 million paid out in gratuities as well. Northwest, the youth center there, I remember vividly, it was 32 million, and 4.5 million was paid out there. The youth center in Mogale was about 14 million, and 2.3 million rand was paid out there. The airports company was about 32 million per annum, and it was about 2.2 million rand. And then it says here continuing, but it's because of the page break, and I'm not very good on Microsoft, so I didn't know how to actually type it. So don't worry about that. It should have been on a separate page. But Northwest is pre-opening expenses on the software was about 2.2 million rand paid out of 4.5 million. And Chair will remember that I explained on the software from last time is that the easiest way to what some of the directors would ask for is we need to sort out the elections or whatever, and this HOD or this MEC wants 2.2 million rand, and the only way to do it really is by software, charging for software. The software is there anyway, so you charge for software, there's no costs incurred. The company makes 2.3 million, and the other person gets 2.2 million rand. ESCOM, I don't know.
That one relating to Northwest Youth Development Center, bribes amounting to 2.2 million rand a year, when the contract value is, what, 4,500,000?
Correct. Now, the contract value was for the supply of software.
Yeah.
So it was just dropping off software.
Yeah.
There was another contract which was valued at about, it was about 1.4 million rand per month, so it would have been 17 million rand, but that was to run the facility.
Yes.
This was over and above it. So what happened there specifically was we were approached, well, me by Sivi and Lamini, one of the directors, and said, look, they need money for elections. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. What I do know is that he would say, they've told me we can charge them for software, 4.5 million rand. But they want 2.2 million rand out of that. So the software was there. And all that had to happen was you had to write a proposal. We said we want to propose that you use the special youth center software, and it's going to cost you 4.5 million rand. The problem comes in is that from an audit perspective, you can't prove that they didn't receive the software, because the software is there. But the value of the software has been so inflated that to be able to allow for a gratuity of 2.2 million. Does that clarify why? So that's not the services, that's only software.
Okay.
ESCOM, I don't know, but I was told reliably there was something there. I will try and get more information from the people, and as soon as I have it, I will provide them to come. I won't coerce them, but I will get them nudged in to come to the commission and speak about it. There was an access control contract, and then Department of Home Affairs was 85 million rand, and there was promises and cash paid close to the value of about 7.2 million rand. At PRASA as well, I've had some of the whistleblowers start coming to me about PRASA. There is an amount there, and there is a bribe being paid there. But if I get solid, reliable, tested information, I will provide the investigators, as I have been, with all the information, and I'll provide it to whoever needs it, as it comes in. But, you know, I don't want to put, and that's why I've said here, I haven't put any figures there because I want to get tacit and real information. All right, so in a total of, and the calculation is incorrect, because the total, I didn't do the total unfortunately, but the total is not 89 million rand. I only see that now.
It's at least. In other words, the unknown amounts are not included in the total.
Okay, no, but, okay, you've got to add the two together.
Yes.
Because I had them separately. Okay, so the annual contract value is about 2.5 billion, the total value of the contract there, of those various contracts per annum, and your total gratuities is about 10 million. Does that answer Chair's question?
Yeah.
The historical contracts 2000 to 2016, the total values over 2 billion rand.
That's correct.
Yes. And the continuing contracts, you estimate where you know the values to be in the region of 90 million rand.
Correct.
And the bribes are totaled in the columns, or the estimates are totaled in the columns that we see in the statement.
Yes.
You were then asked,
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius, before you go to the next one, you may have already said this previously, but I just want you to say it in case you didn't. It seems logical that in quoting the contract prices, if Bosasa knew that they were going to be paying bribes for the duration of the contracts that they would get, seems logical that they would inflate their contract prices. Is that correct?
Chair, the contracts were run at between a 35 and 40% GP percentage, which is phenomenal in today's times.
that's gross profit.
Gross profit percentage, before we get to net. And then these were, remember, the bribes always worked into the contract in terms of chicken consumption and things like that. So
Yes.
it wasn't, you couldn't notice it. So it would bring the GP percentage down by about, it was negligible, a couple of percent.
Yes.
But yes, it would, to answer your question, yes, the bribes
Yes.
were always factored in. I was told factor in 2.5%. Or I was told factor in, we need to pay 2 million rand out. I was told to factor it in.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Yes, in relation to that question and your answer, Mr. Agrizzi, two issues arise.
Yes.
Firstly, how were the bribes ultimately accounted for in the books in relation to tax?
No, they weren't accounted for.
In other words,
No.
they
Let me explain
would
to you
have
how it
been
would work.
logged as an expense.
No, well, that's the thing, is it comes in as an expense, so you benefit in terms of the tax. So your profit, because you don't want to declare it as a dividend afterwards because you pay tax on it. So what was happening, and we had, the gentleman who sat here yesterday was very clever in how he structured it for us. But what would happen is that you take it into consumption, so it becomes a cost of sale. And of course you deflate your profit, so it's coming out, you've got this 6 or 8 million rand in cash, plus you're paying less tax on it. It's cheaper than paying 15% dividends tax or 18% dividends tax or even 28% company tax. So that's how it was done.
And the second question arises as a general comment, quite apart from the bribes, was
Yes.
the state receiving value for money from Bosasa?
Unfortunately, they were receiving, in certain aspects, value for money. In certain other aspects, no. So, and I think I mentioned that in my previous statement, if I recall correctly. They paid a premium, but they're good quality. So they paid for a Rolls Royce and they got a Rolls Royce. I don't know if that explains your...
Well,
I don't want to say each contract was totally different. In Lindela, they weren't receiving value for money. In the youth centers, they were receiving value for money. So it's not one answer fits all.
Yes, perhaps that's an unfair question. So
I think so.
well, it is an important question about whether the state got value for money, because I had evidence from Mr. Dennis Bloom some time earlier, who is a member of parliament,
Yes.
and who served for a certain number of years in the Correctional Services Portfolio Committee, who testified that with regard to, I think it is, you referred to it as a kitchen contract.
Yes.
With regard to the kitchen contract for correctional services, correctional facilities, actually, in effect, Bosasa was not doing the work, or most of the work. I don't want to misrepresent what he said. Most of the work, insofar as the so-called kitchen contract is concerned, was done by prisoners.
That is correct.
And I certainly got the impression from what he said, and I think he was quite emphatic about this, because he even said he was not talking about something that he heard about. He was talking about something that he knew, that the work, the actual work in regard to the so-called kitchen contract was being done by prisoners, and or most of the work. I don't know if he was saying all the work, but most of the work, he said, was done by the inmates and not by Bosasa.
Chair, I've got to tell you the truth here, because I'm under oath. And if I don't, I told you before what my wife will do to me. But the fact of the matter is, I must be honest with you, it is true, the prisoners were used to do the cooking of the food. But in that specific contract, there was training and development done, which was phenomenal. And half of the training and development done was, and I'm not just saying that, I could sit here and tell you that it was a rubbish contract and all that. No. The training and development done, I think, saw in my time 60,000 offenders being trained in the food industry on national accredited courses. So that contract is a bit difficult. For Mr. Bloom to say, that they were ripped off, it's a long debate, and I don't think we should go into it today, because in actual fact, I'll give you an example, that correctional services would fill up the courts about complaints with regards to food, and people and offenders taking the department to court all the time. Since it was done by a professional catering company, we were able to reduce it down to zero. There were no complaints. Another thing that you must consider is that for some other reason, when you're working for a company, you work on a bonus and a retention basis and incentive basis, you tend to be more controlling over the stores and over the purchase prices and things like that. And sometimes corrections let it slip. So to say as a blanket on that specific contract, it wasn't worthwhile, well, there was never ever a riot because of the quality of the food. So I can't fault Bosasa there. Personally, I knew it, I was involved with it. So on that contract, I can't. Was it expensive? Chair, it's expensive to shop at Woolworths. But when you buy at Woolworths, you can eat everything that they provide you with. There's no peels, there's no cabbages and all the leaves and all that. And I'm not advocating Woolworths. I'm just giving an example.
Well, Mr. Pretorius.
On that note, Chair, is it a good time to take the short adjournment?
Yes, it is. That issue relating to value for money, certainly in regard to correctional services, where I had the evidence that I had from Mr. Bloom, should be investigated further, and at some stage I would like to know what the true position is. So we need not deal with it or exhaust it now, but at some stage I would like that I hear evidence from different people as to exactly what value, if any, Bosasa brought, and exactly in what way and what was happening.
Yes. For example, Chair, if a department allows a gross profit margin of close on 40%, how this fits in with the norm.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, Chair, we'll investigate.
Yeah, and of course, I think we heard from Mr. Bloom also that correctional services has got their own farms where they produce food and so on, and he was asking, so one needs to know if they use food that they produce on their farms, and inmates were being used to cook and so on. How did all that how did that affect the price that may have been charged by Bosasa?
Yes,
So
Chair.
at some stage that should be looked at. But we'll take the short adjournment for now, and we'll resume at 11:30.
Thank you.
We adjourn. You may proceed, Mr. Pretorius.
Yes, we're just waiting for Mr. Agrizzi to
Oh.
arrive. But in the meanwhile, Chair, it's my error. May I ask that Mr. Witz, who represents Mr. Agrizzi, places himself on record?
Okay, he didn't do so before, but even if he did, maybe he should again, in case.
I'm sorry, Chair.
I'm saying I was asking whether I didn't do so before.
No, he didn't.
Oh, okay, all right. Let's do that.
Yes, morning, Chair. Sorry, I haven't done it before. I was here in January for
Yes.
Mr. Agrizzi. I was also here for Mr. Van Tonde,
Yes.
Andries and Leon, and Mr. Forster and Mr.
Yes.
Richard Leroux.
Yes.
I act on behalf of all of them, and I'm acting on behalf of Mr. Agrizzi today.
Yes.
And I'm instructed by Wits Incorporated, who are the instructing attorneys, and I'm an advocate. And I appear for Mr. Agrizzi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
I think we'll have to adjourn. Okay. I do know that when we adjourned on my watch, the time was about 17 minutes, 16 minutes, 17 minutes past.
18, I looked
Oh,
carefully.
18. so maybe I didn't give everybody a full 15 minutes.
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
But we'll manage.
Yeah.
My
no, that's all.
apologies, Chair.
Yes.
Normally they fetch me, and I
Yes.
normally keep time, but I didn't this time. I
Yes.
forgot.
No,
My
that-
apologies. Sorry,
No,
I was.
that's fine. I probably robbed people of 2 or 3 minutes of the break. Thank you.
Mr. Agrizzi, before we go to paragraph 14, I'm told that there may have been some confusion about the total amounts in paragraph 12 and 13 of your statement. The total amount of historical contracts between 2000 and 2016, as you've referred to them, the value of the contracts is over 2 billion rand.
That's correct, Chair.
And the value of the bribes, the estimated bribes paid in relation to those contracts is 66 million rand, approximately.
Plus the 9.4 million rand set out, so it's about 75 million rand.
Yes, that would be in paragraph 13, the continuing contracts.
Correct. I just want to clarify, the word continuing contract shouldn't be there. But because I'm not very good on computers, when I
Yes.
typed, I just copied and pasted another table. So on my draft, which I submitted to yourselves, it had on the one page the first batch of names, and on the second page it had this one. So it's all one table. But because I'm not that great, it's split up now.
Right.
Just so that I understand that,
Chair.
on the way you had done it, was the position that you were simply looking at all contracts that were in existence at some stage or another between 2000 and 2016?
Correct, Chair.
Oh, okay, okay.
So-
Okay.
To clarify
Yes.
for Advocate Pretorius as well, so it should be one table.
One
It's
table.
only split because I'm not, I've had
Yes.
to do, I don't have a PA anymore, so I had
Yes.
to do this all myself.
In other words, if one deletes the headings, and I don't suggest we do that now informally, Chair. If one deletes the headings and places one table, it would more accurately reflect what you intended to put in this table.
Yes.
We'll explain that perhaps in a supplementary note, Chair.
Okay.
Well, I'm making a note that says I should ignore this heading at 13.
Just deleting the two headings would,
Yeah, I'm avoiding deleting.
putting a note
So I'm making a note.
next to the heading which says delete. But we'll explain it in a supplementary
Yeah,
note properly.
no, that's
Chair.
all right. That's all right. Thank you. So therefore, viewed in that way, Mr. Agrizzi, it makes sense for you to say the total should be one that takes into account both totals that are in the two columns.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. The second issue, which was raised with you briefly, Mr. Agrizzi, over the short adjournment, you can assist the Chair in relation to the topic value for money.
Yes.
We will investigate it more thoroughly,
Yes.
but in relation to the question of the use of the prison's farms, you do have some information from your own personal knowledge.
Chair, and I've got to be frank and open about it. The problem you have is that sometimes bureaucracy prevents people from performing at their best. So what was happening is that, for instance, yes, they have the farms, but the farms, for instance, would have problems. They wouldn't get seeds on time, so they couldn't plant stuff. They wouldn't get the right feeds for the pigs that they produce at Waterval. They didn't have processing plants. So, you know, those were all hindrances that they picked up. I mean, I remember at Waterval, I put up a processing plant free of charge for them because we're making good money, but also because if I look after the raw material from the farm, it saves costs in the long run to, you see, that kind of impact is not there, unfortunately, with the people that were there. They had been in corrections all their years, they'd done it a certain way, and it wasn't as effective as it could be. So the ultimate result being is that through efficiencies by bringing in a private company or individuals that have been in that business all their life, and the bread and butter is made out of how much money you can save. I'll give you a simple example. If you serve 30 grams at correctional services, more chicken than you're supposed to, let me rather use the word beef or protein. 30 grams is literally the size of my thumb. You know that 30 grams, you escalate it now. You say, well, times that by 240,000 offenders. I don't have a calculator, and I'm damn bad at maths. But 240,000 times 30 grams comes to, say, I don't know, probably about 4 tons. Don't quote me, please. But 4 tons at the going rate of 30 rand a kilo, it's a considerable amount. That's nearly 120,000 rand a day. And that's only on one product. So with the result being, with all the little slips in that they had in corrections, they were losing phenomenal amount of money. When I did the initial surveys, which I thought was the blueprints, right in 2000, the beginning of 2004, I'll give you an example. Westville Prison, their catering costs were in excess of 29 rand per person per day, which sounds, geez, that sounds cheap. But bear in mind, the initial cost that Bosasa charged the department was 10 rand 55 per person per day. So there's such a big disparity that I can't openly say now, no, they never got value for money. They did get value for money in that contract. Yes, if they had called in other contract companies, they probably might have got it for 9 rand or for 8 rand a day. But if you have to compare corrections and private catering, I must be frank with you, it is cheaper to outsource. And I've written papers on it, and I can provide that. But I recall also writing an article for Mr. Lucas Munting, who's involved with prisons and that. And they will tell you the quality of the food prevented a lot of other issues, like court arraignments and that type of thing. So in terms of what Mr. Bloom said was 100% right, that the offenders are being used. But rather use them, train them up, skill them up, and you know, sometimes it becomes embarrassing, but skill them up, train them. I walked into KFC the other day, and one of the offenders, oh, Mr. Agrizzi, the last time I saw you, I was in prison, and everybody looks at you as if you were in prison, but he was one of the guys that had been trained and developed. So, you know, that had its benefits as well. So I can't openly say, with other contracts, I can tell you where people didn't get value for money at all. But in general, yes. But there are, in this specific contract, there was value for money.
No, thank you very much.
You had two examples of the quality of the produce from the farms of correctional services. They illustrate the point I think that you're making. Tell the chair about those.
I don't know if I should. Not on
Please
live
do.
TV. Maybe we should do it in camera. But the one was, for instance, Waterval has pigs, and they grow pork. And pork was a thing in the prisons that, number one, prisoners don't like pork. And the other thing was, if you don't feed the pigs correctly, they put on fat. And they kind of looked like me. But what was happening, we were getting pork that had like 6 centimeters or 10 centimeters of fat on it that I would reject. And the only reason for that is because the bureaucracy would prevent the guys from getting the correct feeds, getting the veterinary services out there, and all that type of thing. And if you look at cabbages, Pollsmoor had a phenomenal problem with vegetables, because what was happening was you weren't actually transporting vegetables, because they just deliver it in a truck. And you're basically shifting sand from the prison farm in Pollsmoor to Malmesbury. All you're doing is shifting sand, and you might get cabbages with it. So one of the initiatives put there was to say, because we were compelled to buy from the prison farms, one of the initiatives there was to be able to set up a production plant where we used lady offenders in the production plant to actually pre-prepare the vegetables and to actually leave the soil on the ground and actually pre-cut the vegetables, make jams and things like that. So from that perspective, there was benefit there as well. What I will do is I will send the investigations team some of the synopsises that I did. But there were other areas that, yes, there was no value for money.
Thank you.
Can we move then, Mr. Agrizzi, to paragraph 14 of your statement?
Yes.
You were asked specifically to deal with the quantity of cash deliveries to Ms. Nomvula Mokunyane and the values of those cash deliveries. And in particular, you were asked, what were you involved with personally, and what did you personally observe? Please tell the chair about that.
Chair, on a monthly basis, there would be 50,000 rand packed. It was done. There were two occasions that I was there when it was received. The one occasion was we had to attend to a problem, I think it was with Walter Sisulu School, Walter Sisulu Place of Safety, that had a major issue, and we needed to move children around and that. And at that stage, we went to the Premier's property, and I remember it vividly, driving up in the beautiful place in Bryanston. And we were taken in. Before that, we had packed the 50,000 rand in a grey security bag. We were taken in, you go through big doors, and then we sat in a lounge, and we were in a waiting area. And then you got the entrance hall, and there was another, on the right-hand side, there was like a massive, it looked like a dining hall come conference room, massive. And she was sitting at the head of the table. There was a chair free. There was Mr. Watson sitting there. I sat next to him. On the opposite side, there was Mrs. Shorpy. I think she was the MEC at that stage for social services, if I remember correctly. And there were some other people, and Tani Makoko was actually with us as well. And we had the meeting. We discussed everything. It went till late at night. And at that stage, everybody was starting to walk out, and Gavin then left the bag next to took the envelope out the bag, or the bag out of the bag, and put it on the side.
I don't know if your voice is going
Sorry,
down, so just
no,
raise
it's
it,
not.
yeah.
This is the problem.
Okay.
So then took the bag from the bag and left the bag on the chair next to it. You know, that I can attest to. That's what happened on that time.
Yeah.
The second one was I was present at the house.
I'm sorry, you can't remember round about when that was?
I cannot.
Okay, all
I
right.
can only say that it was when she was Premier,
Yes.
because I remember the house
Yes.
vividly, and I remember the the situation that led to the meeting that night.
Yes, okay.
And then there was the second time, which was in the house in Krugersdorp. Krugersdorp or Rudolph, I know where the house is and I can tell you the address, but they told me to take out the address, but I remember it happening there when it was handed over. You know, then there were other occasions where Watson
The
would be-
one that you are not telling us about, is that because you previously dealt with it?
Which one is it? There's
you-
two occasions.
Yeah.
The one was
You've
in
told us
Bryanston.
the details about the
Yes,
one.
and the other one is in Krugersdorp.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's not much detail really. It was,
Oh.
I was in the it actually, you know, it just happened like, oh, we're coming for a meeting and then we're going to hand over. You know, so that was, those are the times I can remember vividly what actually happened. But then there was occasions where I would be told,
I'm sorry. This last one seems rather vague, you know. You say come from. Did somebody ask you, let's go to
Yes.
so-and-so's house for a meeting?
Yes.
And what? I think
yeah, so
just
I would
give
never,
us more. It's
I would never go on my
quite
own.
vague, yeah.
So the rule was very simple that you don't, that was Gavin's deal, and Gavin would deal with her. I got occasionally a phone call to do something or to do this or do that occasionally when Gavin's phone was off. So that was,
If I may just interrupt,
Yes.
Mr. Agrizzi, you're being invited to give as much detail about the second occasion as
Okay.
you can recollect.
well, you know, I can recollect the house and I can recollect that there was a meeting that we were going to attend and I can't remember what the meeting was about. Sorry, I just can't.
Do you remember, was money given to her on that occasion?
Yes,
Do you know how much it
it
was?
was 50,000 rand.
How much? 50?
50,000 rand. I remember the amounts.
Yes. Did you get involved in packing the money?
The money was packed the day before.
Not by you or by you?
No, the money wasn't packed by me, it was packed by Gavin.
Yes. And was it given to her in your presence?
Yes,
During the meeting? Or?
yes, I can tell you where. It was in
Yes.
her study. As you
Yes.
walk through the front door,
Yes.
you turn right,
Yes.
okay, there's a desk,
Yes.
and there's a whole lot of memorabilia,
Yes.
fancy memorabilia on the back.
Yes.
And she came down from upstairs,
Yes.
downstairs.
Yes. And at that time, was she still the premier?
No.
Or not? She was
No.
not the premier at that stage?
No.
Do you know whether she was an MEC or was she
I think
minister?
I think it was MEC, I can't recall exactly.
Yeah, but she was not premier, as you
No.
recall. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Well, if you look at paragraphs 14.3 and 14.4, in 14.3, you say there was a second occasion when you were present
That's
when
right.
money was delivered. And
That's
then in
right.
14.4, you say that Watson told you that he was en route to the Premier at her house in Krugersdorp.
Yes, that's
Is that
correct.
correct?
That is correct. I was under the impression Chair was asking, the question asked was I present? When was I present? I was present on those two occasions.
And she was Premier on both those occasions.
On the first occasion, I remember she was a Premier because we went to what is denoted the Premier's house. The second occasion, I can't remember if she was still a Premier or MEC. I can tell you that at that specific time, I think she was more involved with elections at that stage, so it might have been that period of time.
Well, you refer to the Premier in paragraph 14.4. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, but that's a second. The first question you asked me is, you asked me if, Chair, let me get this right in my head. The first question is, when were you present? I was present on those two occasions that I'm reading. So on the third occasion, on 14.4, all right, I wasn't present when he gave it. I was present when he was en route. I had to meet him and hand over to him. And he told me he's going there.
So you're referring to 3 occasions, or 2.
Well, 2 when I was present, and the third occasion I wasn't present when he handed it over, but I was present when I gave it to him to take to her. Am I clear? I just want to,
Yes, no.
Yes, it's just that the statement is slightly different from that, but we hear what you say.
I just want to clarify there. I say often Gavin would request me to pack an amount of 50 in a security bag. I recall at one stage that Watson was in a rush and told me that he was en route to the Premier at her house. At that stage, the Premier was Nomvula Mokonyane. I did this, gave him the package. He wanted to discuss the SIU matter as a matter of urgency. But I never said I went with him.
Yes, so I understand now. 14.2 is one occasion.
Yes,
14.3 is another occasion.
correct.
And 14.4 is yet another third occasion.
So 14.2 is when I was present. 14.3 is when I was present. 14.4, I was not present.
Yes.
14.5, I am present, but there's no cash
All
there.
right, so thank you for clearing that up.
Thank you, Chair. Is it clear?
Yeah. So you have made it clear on what occasions
Yes.
you actually saw the money
Yes.
being handed over or being left, handed over to her or being left in her house.
Correct.
And another occasion, you participated or you gave the money to Mr. Gavin Watson, who told you that he was going to see her.
Correct.
And but you were not there at the meeting that he would have had with her, and therefore you don't know whether on that occasion it was handed over to her or not.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Then in paragraph 14.5, you deal with benefits other than cash
Correct.
being provided to Ms. Mokonyane.
Yes.
Won't you tell the Chair about that, please?
Chair, it was one specific day that we were called to a meeting, and it was early in the, I think it was the morning. It was early in the morning. And I got a call. I was actually busy with something, and when you got a call from Gavin, you dropped everything, and especially if it was the Premier, drop it all. I was actually in a meeting, and I had to leave everything and go. So I went with him. We actually went in the same car, his car. It was a Porsche Cayenne Turbo S. And I would always drive the car when I was with him because I get car sick if I'm driven around. And basically, there was a lot of work that needed to be done. She was there, and her PA was there as well, Sandy Thomas, I think her name was. And basically, there were a lot of things wrong. The CCTV cameras weren't working. The shed where the police guarding her was falling apart. The electric fence wasn't working. It had been overgrown with leaves and trees and that. The swimming pool was green. And there was a lot of issues with regards to lighting. Every second light bulb was out. I remember the floor lighting, which is a special bulb that we had to get on the entrance, was missing. And a lot of things were missing. So we went there, and we then phoned up Richard Leroux, who was then told to come and fix, and he was instructed to fix. I mean, the generator, the auto switch on the generator wasn't working. We had to call in a specialist for that. But every time there was something wrong, it was a phone call, and it would get sorted out. Irrespective of cost, it would get done. So even like the gardening stuff had to be sorted out. I remember getting a guy, our gardener, Marius, to go there and to clean up the gardens and all that. So it's very difficult for me to quantify the costs now. It's a couple of years later. But you're looking at about 350, 400,000 Rand. I mean, new camera systems, electric fence, generator, all that type of stuff used to be done. Does that clarify for you?
Yes. Then in paragraph 14.6, you talk about arranging and paying for functions.
Yep.
Would you tell the Chair about that, please?
No, Chair, we always used to, I believed in, do it properly and do it to the best of our ability. So we would just get requests, and Gavin didn't debate these type of issues. He didn't want to know whether people want to work on a weekend or a Sunday night, or I'll give you an example. I got a call on a Thursday evening at 7:30, and I get told I've got to provide lunch packs, which must include a piece of chicken, 4 slices of bread, jam, a juice, energy bar, and a fruit. It must be tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, must be delivered to it was University of Johannesburg's campus. That's the type of request. And you would have to just do it and make it work. And God forbid if you don't, because you'll have him. And on that specific occasion, I remember they were at UJ, and it was the wrong address they'd given us. It was supposed to be UJ, I think, in Soweto. So we would have to jump and do those type of functions. Lechotlas, we have done, I think I've got more T-shirts on the ANC in my cupboard than I need. Because every time you got there, you got a free T-shirt. So I got T-shirts and caps that I've got enough for a couple of years still. But we'd have to do those functions. Sianoba rallies, we did them, all free of charge. There was never ever charge. You never ever dared asking, are we going to recover this money? There were funerals, personal funerals done. All hours of the night, that type of thing. So all that would be at Bosasa's cost, and it's fact, you know.
And the packs that you talked about,
yes,
you would have prepared for, was it VETS or UJ, for that particular Friday morning, 6 a.m. Would that have been like food parcels or food that was going to be given to people who were attending some meeting or rally or something?
Chair, it was always rallies, and it wasn't just a pack, put it together like you buy, like the typical street food we can buy.
Yes.
It wasn't that.
Yes.
It had to be in a FOMA tray, and then you had to have the logos printed on a sticker. So we had to have a sticker on that with a function and who was involved or whatever, or the naming configuration. It had to be done properly. It was really, you know, it was top class.
But if you were, on this particular occasion, you were given a call Friday early evening or evening, and
Thursday
this was
evening.
to be, on Thursday?
Thursday evening.
On Thursday evening. Oh, yeah, on Thursday evening, and this was to be ready for 6 a.m. You must have, or your people must have worked quite hard throughout the night to get it ready.
Chair, I can't tell you how many nights I personally have worked with a team. I mean, you're talking having to keep people back, 20, 30 people, because you've got to pack 5 or 10,000 packs at the time. You know, I mean, it's a logistical, it used to be a logistical nightmare for me. And maybe what the Commission should do is approach one of the people that are put in charge to do that, and they'll give you all the facts. But the fact of the matter is it was a cost. It was a major, major cost to us.
Yes, yes. Well, give the information to the legal team and the investigators.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then, Mr. Agrizzi, in the paragraphs 14.8 to 14.13 or 14.12, you deal again with evidence regarding the provision of hire vehicles for Ms. Mokonyani's daughter. You don't have to repeat that evidence.
Yeah. Chair, if I may ask you that I don't want to really discuss children and that. I can just give you a brief overview. There's so many times that I would have to, and because I don't feel that, you know, it's right to mention children in this. But there are many occasions where I will get a call. You organize this one's daughter a car. You organize that one's daughter a car, or that one's daughter a car. This is one of those situations. You know, costs here would be between 80 and sometimes 150,000 rand, and there's a whole lot of other issues that go with it. There's accidents, there's demands, there's all that. So yes, that happened. The facts are here.
But you say, you know, you have to us to organize this or that for this one's daughter or this
Yes.
one's daughter. So far, we have only heard from you evidence in regard to the daughter of one politician, as far as I remember. Are you suggesting that you have personal knowledge of children of other politicians who might have benefited in the same way as the daughter of this particular politician that you have testified about?
Chair, there are numerous examples. I've tried to give you everything, and I
Yes.
mentioned it right from the beginning that there's just not enough time. We're always under pressure
Yes.
getting the stuff
Yes.
to you and
Yes.
to get it. I've started writing up everything else, but
Yes.
these things just carry on and carry on. I mean, I recall now there's another one, you know, and so it happens.
Yes.
Jogs your memory. So
Yes.
I don't want to, I will probably
You will-
sit
you-
and finish off, but I mentioned in the previous one, I think it was Mr. Vincent Smith's daughter as well that had a vehicle.
Oh, yes,
I
you
do mention
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then I mentioned this one, and then there's another one. But, you know, it only comes to mind when you start really talking about it
Yes.
and that.
Yes.
You know, bearing in mind,
Yes.
you know, these are prepared very quickly and, you know, we write them down.
Yes, yes. Okay, okay. Well,
Well-
if and when you remember or see something that reminds you of things that are relevant, you know, let the legal team or investigators know.
Yes, you will understand, Mr. Agrizzi, if we have evidence available as investigators and the legal team of some that have been omitted, we should bring that forward in fairness to all.
Yes.
So if you do have any direct recollection at the moment, please feel free to tell the chair.
Yeah, you know, the problem is I don't purposefully omit them, and I don't want to do that. I want to be frank and open. But I remember now Richmond and Matisse kids that would get flights and tickets and cars. And then there's, I can't remember the name now of the child.
Yes, you
But
mentioned
I'll-
Gillingham's children.
Oh, yes, no, that was a given.
Yes.
You know, then there's, for instance, one of the ex-chairmen of the companies, and I don't really want to mention his name because I first want to check my facts. But I know that we
Well,
did.
if you are not sure, it might be better to check your facts and then give information to them, and then I know that you have no problem coming back if need be. But
Sure.
see what you, if it's something that's important and that you have personal knowledge of, give it to them, and we'll take it from there.
You know, with the greatest respect, Chair, it's very difficult because I don't have documentation. I work off my memory,
Yes.
and I work
yes,
off.
Yes.
Then I go and look for the facts.
Yes,
Then I
yes,
find the facts.
yes.
I go and search for them. I phone
Yes.
up people. I get the
Yes.
documentation
Yes.
that corroborates, because I'd
Yes.
hate to implicate somebody here that is
Yes.
not
Yeah.
guilty. So
Yes.
what the result being is that, for instance, avenues get blocked for me. I mentioned this morning to the investigators, I'm busy with a cell phone record, but how I've had to fish and try and get my old cell phone records,
Yes.
because all that information's been blocked off by me. You must remember, and I attest to it, where I've asked even the old attorneys for information, they refuse to give me the information. So as I get the information, that's when I put it in an affidavit. But yes, I'm trying to rack my brain to think of absolutely everything, because I also want to get closure on this.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
it's
no, that's
important.
fine. Thank
But
you.
I think once they get the right information, and I can tell them where to go find it,
Yes.
and once
yes.
they've found it, then I
Yes.
can put it all together for them. That's not a problem.
Well, the investigators and the legal team should be able to assist in terms of what legally needs to be done to get for you or the commission to get information that is important for the commission. So I know you are in touch with them, so
Yes.
do talk to them to say, I'm having difficulty finding this information. Is there a way in which the legal team or the investigators can help? And they should be able to help most of the time.
I'll give you, if I may, I'll give you an example, Chair, is where SARS, for instance, they're busy now with an investigation. And the liquidator, I tell them exactly where to go, and then they go and get that information. And then they ask me to help piece it together for them. So that's where I can be of assistance.
Okay.
And I'll assist.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Then in paragraph 14.14, you repeat, but in summary form, that the purchases of food products, meat hampers, liquor, and other items that you set out in your original affidavit as deliveries to Ms. Mokunyane, that would be done on an annual basis. And you
Correct.
say here without fail.
Correct. And if I understand correctly, that's in answer to the question that was put to me by the Chair on how many deliveries took place and how often.
Do you recall over what period that would have taken place,
Yes.
approximately?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Then you have testified that in relation to Ms. Mokunyane, and I presume others as well, that you would receive requests from time to time.
Yes.
And you've looked for written evidence, as I understand it, of such a request.
Correct.
One example is Annexure FF, which appears
Yes.
on page 79 of bundle S9.
That's correct.
The email train begins on page 80 and continues through to page 79. It's not
Correct.
very clear from the documentation what's happening here. Perhaps you should explain that to the Chair.
I can explain it. I remember this specific incident vaguely. What happened was I would get requests like this all the time. Now, once more, unfortunately, why this looks the way it does is because all my emails were deleted, but luckily there was an archive folder where a lot of the things were kept by a person that I don't want to mention their name because they have been victimized already and they're on the inside. And I've had to use those tactics to get things like this to prove my case, that I'm not just a blithering fool and lying in front of everybody. So this was, for instance, a request, and then this person would be told, listen, you go deal with Bosasa, they'll sort it out. They'll help you with everything that you need. But this is just one of those emails. This one relates to somebody needing help with purchasing of equipment and importing equipment as well. And you know, you feel obliged to do this because the person's been sent to you and your boss is telling you, listen, you better get it sorted out. You don't know how you're going to sort it out, but you've been told you will sort it out. So this is the type of things that we have to do. I mean, the interesting thing is this family have no money. There's a bunch of investors in all the hotels, but there is no one to help them jump there. They went to the wrong door instead. I mean, so our doors were like knocked on all the time.
Well, the original request in the email dated Tuesday, 3 April, is then forwarded via a Mzindaba to yourself from Nomvula Mokunyane.
That's
and
correct.
that appears at the top of the page.
That is correct.
So this request was just passed on to you, it
Yes.
seems, to attend to.
And what would happen is Gavin Watson would get a call to say, from her, and say, listen, sort this out. And I would get the call from Gavin Watson, or I would sometimes get a call directly to say, sort this out.
But there's a direct communication, it appears on Friday, the 13th of April, 2012, in relation to the contents of this email chain from Nomvula Mokunyane directly to yourself.
That's correct.
Then you were asked about the need for and the reason for the continued assistance given to Ms. Mokunyane after the direct relationships that you'd spoken about previously and her connections as Premier had ceased. Do you see that in paragraph 15?
Yes, I do.
Why did the relationship between Bosasa and Ms. Mokonyane continue, and how did it continue?
Well, must remember something, and some people are very powerful in politics, all right? I'm sitting here on national TV telling you this, Chair. But it's scary, because people have the ability, and I've experienced it firsthand, to do a lot of things. I've seen it happen in that company. I've seen prosecutions being stalled. I've seen things that, that just boggles your mind. One of them is this, where she was very powerful, and I was told categorically that you don't mess, you just do, and you don't argue. One example, I'll give you an example, is that I walked into a meeting and I asked the question afterwards, why? What benefit is there for us? Not knowing that there's a whole lot of other things happening in the side. And it always confused me. And then I picked up on Annex to GG, and I realized, geez, Angelo, you're blind. Because there's a classic example of how this is major projects. Bosasa is small fry. These are major projects. Now, this is why Watson was always looking after the Premier at that stage, or the MEC or Nomvula Mokonyane. So it refers to a wind farm that's been the subject of major controversy that I've tried to stay away from because I didn't want to get involved.
I'm sorry, Mr. Agrizzi, may I
Yes.
ask you to speak closer to the mic?
Sorry.
Your voice drops if you move away.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. So the big thing was for me the SIU case that we were told was closed. And that I remember at one stage when we were running the call center for the elections that we walked down the passage near the lodge, and she said to me, she turned around, I was walking with Gavin, had been in a meeting with her, and she had turned around and said, don't worry about it. Because I kept asking, because I was concerned about it. She said, don't worry, it's closed. You don't need to worry. What you worried about, the press? She said, don't worry about the press. The thing's closed, nothing's going to happen. So that was where the power was. But then I found out that in actual fact, it was a little bit more than that. The long-term plans are always there in the background. And the wind farm was a very controversial issue. As a matter of fact, I met with the person that originally was going to do the EIA for the wind farm.
The EIA being?
The EIA.
Yes.
Impact,
That stands for?
Environmental Impact Assessment. So with any big project, you have to do that. So I know that it's a multi-billion rand deal. I know that for a fact. I know for a fact that everything was done to circumvent the rules of the EIA, to make it hurry up. And this was a common trend with the Watsons. So you would worry about that later, The company that owns the wind farm is Ronnie Watson, Valence Watson, Jared Watson, and Ronnie Watson's daughter, Tandy Sneed. And I then remember that Gavin was also involved in this whole thing. And then I saw the article on the 13th of March, which refers to this. And I got a call to say, now you know why this whole thing's happening. So in Annex to GG, and maybe you want to refer to it, you'll see that Yanda Energy Projects, laid-back investments, and I recall laid-back investments because Tony Perry always mentioned it. He was the company secretary at one stage, and I always remember laid-back investments. And in the vault, I always remember seeing the file, laid-back investments. So I knew that to me was the link between Bosasa. And then, if you look at the actual report, it tells you the whole story.
Before we go to Annexa GG, which we will do in a moment,
Yes.
Mr. Agrizzi, let's just sketch the background. In the Eastern Cape is a large property
Yes,
surrounded by a nature reserve.
correct. It's known for the black eagles I think the eagles that are in that area.
Yes. And we know that wind farms and bird life, particularly eagles, don't get on very well with one another.
Correct.
So the establishment of a wind farm on this property is an environmentally sensitive issue.
Very.
Very. And for that reason, an environmental impact assessment would have to be done, and it would have to go through certain official channels,
That's
which we
correct.
will come to in a moment. The members of the Watson family are involved in several companies which apparently own or manage the land.
That's correct.
Let's then go to Annexure GG, having sketched that background. Annexure GG is on page 82. This is an article that appeared on the 13th of March 2019 under the byline of John Yeld of Ground Up, presumably an environmental person.
That is correct.
And it deals with the wind farm issue, the Watsons, and the Minister of Communications, Nomvula Mokonyane, at that time the Minister of Communications. She subsequently became, at a relevant time, the Minister of Environmental Affairs.
That is correct.
Correct. If one goes to page 83 and one looks at the second paragraph of that article, one has a high-level description of the project plan. It reads, the plan is for 47 turbines, each 85 meters high, and with 130 meters diameter blades on top of the Groot Winterhoek mountain range at an altitude of about 1,000 meters.
That's correct.
The farm would be situated on 21 parcels of land, totaling about 12,200 hectares, between three portions of Grindal Nature Reserve. You know that for a fact, do you?
Yes, I do.
The next paragraph reads, Grindal is a provincial nature reserve and the surrounding Grindal wilderness area is protected under the National Forestry Act.
That is correct.
Then the next paragraph, importantly, reads, the project proposal drew strong objections from, amongst others, the Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency, the Eastern Cape's Department of Economic Development, Environment and Tourism, BirdLife South Africa, Wilderness Foundation Africa, and the Elands River Conservancy. Then we read, but the wind farm received from the, let me start that again, but the wind farm received the environmental go-ahead from the National Department of Environmental Affairs in April last year. This decision is now under appeal. Who would hear that appeal?
The Minister, Nomvula Mokonyane.
So she, in her capacity as Minister of Environmental Affairs, would be scheduled to hear that appeal in relation to this wind farm in which the Watsons are involved.
Well, that's where the concern was.
Then the article actually mentions a few paragraphs down, just above the heading, the Bosasa story. Mokonyane should be preparing to consider the appeals, but she may be facing a significant conflict of interest that should disqualify her from making any appeal decision.
That's correct.
So on the evidence we have, Ms. Mokonyane is receiving benefits from Bosasa and is now dealing with an appeal relating to the Watsons and the wind farm.
Correct.
Her response to any allegation of conflict of interest is on page 84 of the article, which has a heading in the middle of the page, no conflict of interest, says Minister's Office. Then the conflict of interest is set out in the first paragraph under that heading, and the second paragraph under that heading reads, Mokonyane has indicated through her spokesperson, Ndamasi, that she will not withdraw from the adjudication process. The spokesman says, in response to questions by the environmental organization Groundup, and I read again, in quotes, "There is no conflict of interest that arises in the above matter, as the department must apply its regulations and legal prescripts to all appeals without prejudice, based on directors and or owners of companies involved in the appeal process. The Minister acts and exercises her powers within the parameters of such process." And then there's a comment strongly to the contrary by Professor Pierre de Vos of UCT, but we need not go there because we're now venturing into the realm of legal opinion. But for the moment, to summarize, the Watsons have an interest in an environmentally controversial wind farm, and Nomvula Mokonyane will make the final decision about whether that project can go ahead or not.
That's as put out.
Yes, we needn't take that issue then any further for the present at least. Let's then go back to your statement, if we may, Mr. Agrizzi.
Yes, sure.
The further reason for the continued relationship between Bosasa on the one hand and Ms. Mokonyane on the other is dealt with by you in paragraph 15.3 and following.
Yes.
Tell the Chair about that, please.
Chair, on numerous occasions, there were meetings. I mean, there were discussions between Mokonyane and Watson regarding the SIU. And the one issue was we'd go to a meeting with Mr. Richmond MT, and he would say to us that Jiba had said to him that they need to bring the file back to, I don't understand how it works, but they would have to bring the file back to the MPA, and Anwar Dramat must release the file. There were stories like that. I don't know the processes, but there was constant pressure that a meeting had to happen with her and Anwar Dramat, and who was then the national head of the Hawks, and this was to make sure that the Bosasa matter gets returned to Advocate Jiba's offices so that she can arrange for the matter not to be prosecuted. That is what, I was in those meetings, that is what I heard, and the pressure was put on by Gavin to Nomvula Mokonyane to say, Dramat must give you back the files. You go have a meeting now with him, and I believe a meeting took place.
You refer in paragraph 15.4 to a meeting attended by yourself, Joe Gamidi, and Gavin Watson, where the involvement of Nomvula Mokonyane was discussed. What were you told at that meeting about involvement with Ms. Mokonyane?
Chair, I tend to push things to a point, and I investigate, and I check, and I check, and I check. And I started questioning things. I started saying, you know, but why are we doing this, guys? You know, it's not helping us. Let's become apolitical or whatever. We don't need this. I mean, we were doing well without this. Why do we need it now? And I was told, listen, back off. You don't understand everything. And Gavin used to refer, whenever I brought this up, and he'd speak in Xhosa and say, oh, leponilo. I don't know what that means to today, but always use the words, oh, leponilo, you know, as shoving me off. And then afterwards he'd phone and apologize. But it was clear that he did not want anybody interfering with her or stopping anything. That was his political ally, and he wanted them kept close.
In paragraphs 15.5 to 15.7, you mention a little out of sequence, because we're going to return to Ms. Mokonyane in a minute. Other politicians mentioned or related to, in one form or another, Bosasa and Mr. Watson.
Chair, what happened there was, and it's been so many times, they would always threaten me with politicians. always threatened me. I know people in the Hawks, I know this one, I know that one. And there, I was told once, straight out, listen here, Jacob Zuma's kids, I don't know which ones, I don't know which wife, but I think it was not Kate, I can't remember. But basically, those kids are very close to Valence's kids, Jared Watson and Daniel Watson, and those kids are Valence Watson. And this would be brought up quite regularly. I recall the night where they tried to buy me out. Ronnie Watson, who was in intelligence previously, I don't know his whole history, he actually said to me, I've got counterintelligence on you. I know exactly what's happening. You know, so it was always that threat, and we know this person, that person knows that person. We'll deal with you, you know. So that's why I mentioned it in there, that there was very close confidence to them.
All right. Can we move then to paragraph 15.8, unless you have anything to add in relation to 15.5 to 15.7?
No, I think that's pretty simple. I mean, it was the whole issue with regards to the shares in Vulisangu that was held by Saviwe Mapisa on behalf of Nosaviwe Mapisa. I think that's, we don't need to go into depth.
Let's then go, if we may, to paragraph 15.11. In paragraph 15...
Sorry, Mr. Can I just add something as well? And I think it's critical to mention it because it is a concern. The one thing is that you must remember that this is an example of the Watsons insured, that they had the most powerful people in the country as their connections and friends. So sitting here today, I'm very vulnerable, like I was last time, because those connections and friends are widespread. I don't even know all of them, but I'm just saying that I was told so many times, categorically, that they are the most politically connected people in South Africa. Sorry, Mr.
Yes,
Pretorius.
if you want to add anything in 15.8, 15.9, and 15.10 to your verbal evidence, please feel free to do so.
You know, there was a specific time I went to Italy on a tour, and Joe Gumedi joined me, and Gavin Watson joined me. So it was my tour, but I took them with. And at that actual meeting, I used that opportunity to broaden our scope on the business because we were away and we could talk openly with each other. And I asked the question, you know, why, again, one of them, Nomvula Mukunyani, why be political? And I was told categorically, I was actually scolded to shut up and just do as I'm told to do. And that was one of the things, you know, and at that stage, Jacob Zuma, I remember, was the serving president. But that was the situation that we had to deal with. And that's where the concern regarding state capture really came in. I think that covers it.
Thank you. Let's deal with paragraph 15.11 because shortly after you gave evidence here for the first time in January,
Yes.
an article appeared in the press with photographs, in fact a short video of what became known as the Bosasa call center.
The war room.
The war room. Tell the chair about that, what this war room was, how it came about that Bosasa funded and created this, how it was run, and who was involved, please.
Well, involved in it, I think at that stage in 2000, there's so many of them, but if I recall back the 2014 one, because for example, there was the Mangahung one, where that was run a call center and a war room for Jacob Zuma. And then there was the 2014 one, which was run for, I think it was local elections or national elections, I can't even recall. You know, Chair, I kind of distanced myself from the nitty-gritty of that. I would be told, sort this out, get it running, and I would get it running. But I wouldn't visit there. I wouldn't even go there to see how it was doing in that. I would send one of the juniors. Because 9 out of 10 times, this consumed the whole company for up to 2-3 months at a time. So in 2014, if you're referring to the war room,
2014 was the national election,
Elections, that-
2016 was the local government election.
that's right. So it was done in 2014 and in 2016. So in this specific incident, I remember that we had to arrange the one section, which is about a 30-seater call center. So there's a massive call center there. One half of the call center deals with government fleet contracts, Corona. The other half deals with, it was empty at the stage. It was originally built to deal with the integration of CCTV access controls for Department of Justice and Correctional Services to bring everything together as one whole unit, and that never happened. But what happened was I was told, listen, just kit it out. New computers, new video walls, you know, like the wall you've got behind you with the about that size video walls had to be put up. Literally get like a week or 2 weeks to do it. Branding has to go up, has to become ANC. It has to, you've got to convert the lodge for volunteers to stay at the lodge. You've got to provide food for them 3 times a day. Because some ministers are there, you need to make sure that the security is in place. All that type of thing had to be done on a regular basis. And, you know, if I asked a question, it was, SIU matter, my friend. Shut up, just do it. If we do this, everything will go away. And we get away with this business, we can get that type of thing. So that's basically the war room that was set up. But the cost of the war room to run it, I mean, we eventually ended up paying the volunteers as well. They got a salary to do it. To run that war room cost millions and millions of rand. And it's dedicated lines, dedicated data. It is live screening. It's a mega operation, Chair.
That kind of operation you did for the organization, the ANC,
Yes.
You'd be doing it for the ANC at the request of somebody.
That's right.
And this one you're talking about would have been at the request, at whose request, for example?
Mvula Mokonyane.
Yes, and you would not invoice the ANC or Ms. Mokonyane.
No, never,
Yes,
never.
yes. You talked about. Did you mention something about another operation you did at Mangaung?
Yeah, there was
during the
Mangaung operation. There was
conference?
some of the local election operations we did as well.
Yes,
And we'd have the stats up on the board, and it was run with military precision, where we provided software and all that. So
yeah.
there were quite a few. I can't remember all of them.
And when you did these operations, would Bosasa's name be up there for everybody to see, or not really?
No, but it would be subtle, because you would have people eating in the diner.
Yes.
So they would see the campus, and they would see the smokes and mirrors,
Yeah.
and they would be impressed. And they would
Yes.
say, gee, Bosasa actually a nice company.
So are you saying that people other than, for example, Ms. Mokonyane,
Yes.
would know that Bosasa is involved because maybe Bosasa's name was written somewhere where they could see, or are you saying not really?
There were times when a lot of ministers visited it,
Yes,
and MECs.
yes, and that they would see the name?
Yes,
Yes,
because it's all over.
it was all over.
Yes.
Would it be all over each time you did these kinds of operations for the ANC, or only sometimes?
No, every time.
Every time?
Whenever we did anything, Chair,
Yes.
we had a branding division,
Yes.
which is equivalent to a media house
Yes.
that you'd find in any large company.
Yes.
Where we had, for instance, the ability to print banners that
Yes.
size behind you within 30 minutes.
Yes.
So if we were having a visit from yourself,
Yeah.
we would print a banner like that.
Yes.
You'd have your name flashing on every single TV in the office
Yes.
park.
Yes.
You would be welcomed. Security would have special welcoming badges
Yes.
made. Even your peppermints that you get on the table
Yeah.
would have your logo on. The bottle of water would have the logos on. So
Yes.
everybody knew.
Yes, everybody knew.
It was a massive marketing campaign.
So are you able to say certainly leaders at Mangaung would have known?
Yes.
Yes, because the writing was there. It's Bosasa, Bosasa, Bosasa.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been at Mangal, it was at the call center.
At the call center?
Yes.
Okay, so only those who visited the call center would know that Bosasa was running the call center?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Yes, Mr.
Mr. Agrizzi,
Yes.
in paragraph 15.12, and in the paragraphs that follow up to paragraph 15.15, you deal with matters which you've touched on or dealt with up to now. Is there anything, just if you would have a look at those paragraphs, and if you want to add anything to your evidence, please do.
If you look at it, I mean, because of this protection we had, there was never ever contracts cancelled. Not one single contract was ever cancelled. Even though it was challenged, it was never cancelled.
Well, that's something that I think a lot of people, including myself, might have been at some stage or another thinking about. One of the things I have thought about at some stage in the past was, that is even before I got involved in the commission, was there have been allegations of corruption involving Bosasa in the media for so many years. How come Bosasa keeps on continuing with contracts and tenders with various government departments, despite all these allegations in the media, and we never hear that they've been resolved, but they just continue to seem to get a lot of contracts and tenders. So were people who were supposed to attend to this when they see things in the media involving their departments, involving their government, involving maybe parastatals? I don't know if there were any parastatals involved. Were they looking away when they were supposed to say, I've seen something in the media involving my department, involving my government, saying, you know, there's corruption involving this Bosasa company. I want to know what's happening. I want to have this dealt with. Why was this not being done if it wasn't being done? So I'm just saying that even before I got involved in the commission, I was concerned about, you know, for years one has been hearing about in the media corruption, Bosasa, correctional services, government departments, but there seemed to be nothing being done by anybody. Well, you might not be able to say anything, but you said something that prompted what I've just said.
I think what you've said is so true. That's the power that the Watsons have. And nothing gets done. I mean, there are people that have phoned me and says, you know, I want to come talk to you because there was a gentleman that's been referred to me that worked at corrections and was very vocal about this, Mr. Jack Shilabane. He was very vocal about Bosasa and why are we only using one company? It gets eradicated, it gets taken out of the department. Yeah, so there's a lot of these things. I mean, there are people that complained. The classic example was with the previous late Commissioner, Vernie Peterson. When he complained, what happened was he was transferred and swapped with the Minister of Sport, the lady, I can't remember her name now. What happened there was there was a move out. Then she cancelled the one contract, well, not cancelled, just didn't renew it. She was moved out. Somebody else was put there. So it's a constant battle.
Well, you see, it may well be that a company such as Bosasa, to the extent that the evidence that you have given in this commission is found to be correct, to that extent, it may well be that its approach was we must bribe certain people in order to get contracts, and we must do certain other things for other people. We're not going to necessarily bribe them, but we'll do certain things for other people so that they look away. They don't ask questions. And I'm wondering whether in doing the kinds of things that you have told me about in relation to the governing party or for the governing party, whether that may have had the effect that senior people within the governing party who would have been aware of all the allegations of corruption in the media involving Bosasa, when they saw that Bosasa was involved in doing things for the organization, decided to look away and not to say, for example, I want to know whether these things I'm reading in the newspaper about Bosasa and correctional services are true. I want an investigation to be done, and I want it to be done quickly, and I want results by an outcome by a certain time. And I was going to ask you later on, but maybe I may as well mention now. I saw something in the media in terms of which there were allegations that certain donations had been done or made by Bosasa to the ANC, and a certain huge amount was mentioned there and was said to have been admitted by a senior leader of the ANC to have been given that the donations given in cash or kind by Bosasa over a certain period would be at least a certain number of millions over the time. And the question is, with all these allegations having been brought to the public's attention by the media over the years about Bosasa, did senior people within the governing party not see all of these things and decide that action must be taken to find the truth? Did they look away? Did they look away because they knew that Bosasa was giving donations to them? I don't know, but those questions arise. And maybe in due course you will tell us whether you know anything about donations to.
I do.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes, and perhaps this is a good place to highlight the difference between a series of irregular procurement arrangements or incidents and what this commission is obliged to investigate, and that is state capture, because it seems to me that you've given evidence, Mr. Agrizzi, about more than just a series of irregular procurement acts or incidents. You've spoken about a reasonably well-organized network of well-placed, well-connected and powerful people, their loyalty secured through financial incentives, bribes, and that network would then promote and protect, for example, private interests such as Bosasa, allowing them in turn, through irregular procurement and practice, to extract money from the state.
You're 100% right, and what the Honourable Chair has said is true. There are large donations. I know of large donations given to the top six at one stage of 10, 12 million rand checks that were taken there. And it always appeared as if it was just taken there because then there's a meeting. But you're 100% right, Chair. Once the other people see that that company is very proliferant, don't touch it. Don't mess with it. It's working, don't touch it. Because if you touch it, you might lose your job. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And you might lose your power base. And that's what it really was. If people know that I'm speaking to the Pope on the phone on a regular basis, the cardinal who sees me gambling is not going to say anything to me. He's going to leave me alone. You know, that's the only one who's really beyond reproach then is the Pope. And if you're bribing the Pope, all the cardinals are not going to turn against the Pope or turn against you because you got his cover. It's a bad example. I shouldn't use it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Apart from that, are you happy to move on then from paragraph 15.15?
Well, you mentioned a certain structure now, just now. If the position is that indeed that is something that you have personal knowledge of, make sure that they've got all the information.
Chair, for me to get the facts, I need to get all the records.
Yes. Yeah.
Once you got that, I can put it all together.
Yes. No,
You know, eventually.
I have said so before, and I know the legal team is definitely very prepared. If you know that there is certain information about which you want to make available to the Commission, which is important for the type of thing that the Commission is investigating, but you can't get the documents, talk to the legal team, the investigators. They will do the best they can to get that, because that's part of their job. Those people who want to assist the Commission must be assisted by the investigators and the legal team to get the information, because we are the ones who want that information.
I understand, Chair, and
Yes.
quite honestly, they've been hard at work. I mean, but I know they're inundated.
Yes.
And I just flood them sometimes with
Yes,
information
with
which I shouldn't. I
information.
mean, I
Yes.
sit and email,
Yes.
information.
Yes.
Maybe what I need to do is to sit and write a whole dossier.
Yes.
Spend 2 months writing a dossier and actually saying where to go look
Yes.
and that type of thing.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. The next issue that was raised was the date of the interdict brought on behalf of Bosasa to interdict the SIU investigation into Bosasa and its activities.
That's correct.
You say that those papers were filed in the North Gauteng High Court.
That's correct.
And you give the case number, and that was done on the 30th of April 2009.
That is correct.
Then if we may move to the next topic that arose in your evidence, and you've dealt with it briefly now today, and that is the series of events involving the Department of Social Services in the Northwest Province.
That's correct.
You named two people, Khasi and Chidi,
Yes.
in your evidence formally, and you've had an opportunity now to make further investigations and to allow yourself to give further evidence about the relationship between Bosasa and the Northwest Province. You deal with that in paragraph 17. Won't you tell the Chair about that, please?
So, Chair, I've managed to get some information. I've met the ladies, so I know what they look like. So I did some searching and got into some of my old emails in the archives, which only became available since the liquidators took over. And I'm sure you've heard of the big mess with the liquidation there and that. So a lot of the documents are still being destroyed, and I'm still trying to get them recovered. But I don't have direct access at all. So Chidi appears to be a Machadiso Cordelia Mokhale, a former head of the department at the Department of Social Development in the Northwest. Both the individuals were government employees or government officials in the Northwest in Mahikeng. And it was Sivian Dlamini who actually introduced me to them. And interestingly then, Sivian then, and I didn't see it until I'd uncovered all the old emails. Sivian had actually approached me with her CV. She was leaving the Northwest Department because there was a hotting up of the investigation against her, and she decided to resign, and she wanted another job and wanted me to, because she was an advocate, to look at providing an opportunity maybe with one of the companies that legally we were working with at that stage. But the documentation is available on that, the actual CV, the transmission to myself and that.
Did you meet with the two persons you've just mentioned?
Yes.
And what was the content of those meetings?
Well, the content of the meetings was to provide the software, as I mentioned, to be able to raise funding, which they told me was for electioneering purposes. So this was the content of the meeting, the one meeting. The other one was discussing the fencing at one of the facilities and security systems at one of the facilities, where also it was used as a laundering type system.
This fictitious arrangement around software where you say items of no value
Yes.
were either in the possession of the Northwest Province or were transferred to the Northwest Province.
Yes.
The arrangement, as I understand it, was that the Northwest Province would pay Bosasa 4.5 million rand for that quote-unquote transaction.
That's correct.
Bosasa would keep half, approximately half, and
Would
the
you
other
like
half
me-
would go to the individuals concerned.
Okay, would you like me to explain how it would work?
Yes, please, because what arises here is the intervention of Mioto Trading.
Okay. All right. So what happens is that, Chair, you get awarded a contract for Northwest for one of the youth centres to manage a youth centre, which encompasses detaining children that are awaiting trial, training them, putting them through school curriculum and all that. It's always perceived as a social initiative, but it's not. You're getting paid 450 rand per child, sometimes 700 rand per child per day. So included in that cost, you basically have to provide all the services. Now, to provide the services effectively, you use a computer program which admits children and keeps records of the children and that type of thing. So it's a bit of a have to have anyway. So that's included in your price per person per day. But then you'd get a request from somebody who says, we need money for electioneering. So what would happen then was Sivian Dlamini would raise an invoice for a computer program that is paid for in the per diem cost, but it's raised separately to be able to say, well, now, if you want this computer program, which we need in terms of education and tracking and all this type of thing, you have to pay 4.5 million rand. It's a once-off cost, so government isn't burdened with a month-to-month cost. It's very simple because nobody can prove that the software was never delivered. The software is there already, it's working. And if somebody says, well, the software was there, well, no, that was demo software. So what would happen is that that software would be sold and it would be an invoice raised. Obviously, these people would make sure that the invoice was paid and an amount, obviously now the company is getting 4.5 million rand for nothing. Invoice is raised and the cash is sent out. Does that clarify it?
Yes, I just want you, please, to deal, if you would, with paragraph 17.6,
Okay.
Mioto Training and Morocco Consultants.
Okay. So when
We heard evidence about that yesterday
Okay.
from Mr.
So
Fenton.
when Piet Venter decided to approach us and say he wanted to come clean on that, one of the things that he raised was Mioto. I mean, this happened way after I'd left. And he then explained the situation to me on how Mioto worked with Morocco and gave me all the detail as well, and then put it in his own statement. But what happened there, for instance, was there was much more money needed. So what they drew up and it's very clear how it was done, was another way to filter money is training. So they wrote up invoices to the value of, I think, 1.4 million rand, wrote up those invoices, wrote up a contract, which Miota's got 2 employees, Piet Venter and his sister-in-law, for training of 1.4 million rand, 1.3 million rand. I can't recall the exact amount. I don't want to actually even start looking for it. But then invoice it out, it gets paid, and that's how Bribes were paid out. Now, that specific one was also to do with Smart City and a potential contract in the Northwest area. But I think, if I can just add there, that there was never ever training that, so it's all fictitious stuff. But that was how Sivian and Gavin Watson had decided to move the funding.
Yes, as I understand your evidence, it coincides with that of Mr. Venter, at least in the respect that Mioto Trading was used to make disguised payments or to make payments that could not be easily traced.
Yes, and he showed me he actually gave me documentation, and that's why I included it in mine, because I tested the documentation, I tested the information, and then submitted it on my affidavit as well.
Then in paragraph 18, you deal with a question relating to Mr. Mti and his son and a meeting that took place at Clearwater. Please tell the Chair what happened.
Chair, what happened there was, I used to get pulled into the most weirdest of situations. There was a child that was a bit wayward, all right, and it was a bone of contention and was creating havoc for Mr. Mti. I was asked to intervene. I was sitting in the meeting there, and funny enough, I think it was a time when my son had just done well, and he had got student of, I don't know what he had done, but he had done exceptionally well at school, at university, and he got some awards. I don't know what happened, but the facts of it is that I was then told by Gavin, listen, you better sort out, I want this guy happy at all times, put his son into your son, let them work together, let's see if we can, not rehabilitate, that would be wrong, and I don't like to talk badly about these kids, but
to inspire him or motivate him.
Inspire him, yes, to become motivated on how to run a business and that type of thing. So I agreed to have a lunch meeting, and I put my family in a precarious position because my son wasn't happy. He says, I don't like this. He was a very active student at WITS, and he knows people there, and he worked with those people. And so he wasn't happy at all. But nothing ever came of it. He just retracted, and he didn't even bother registering the company. He wasn't interested in really doing. So but that just gives you an example of how I personally was compromised to keep other people happy. Like the phone calls at 9 o'clock at night to have 10,000 or 5,000 meals ready the very next morning. So that's the extent that it went to. I mean, there was even a situation, and I allude to it in the next paragraph, where one morning I arrived at the gate and I said to Gavin, I said, no man, who's this gentleman at the gate? The security guy. No, he's a security guard. I said, no ways, guys. That's father like son. And I went personally, and I went and asked the question, what is your name? And he gave me surname. I went back, I was very annoyed. I said, guys, we're in the middle of this news and that, and you go and put the gentleman's son, that looks identical to him, at the gate. How daft can you be? Well, the next day he wasn't there, but I'm saying that that's the kind of things that had to happen.
Chair, maybe we could regain that 1 minute.
Yes, okay.
1 minute to one.
Let's do that, it's fine.
Thank you.
We took, you suggest that you don't ask further questions because lunchtime.
Well, it is, well, having said that, it's
You
now-
want to look. Well, it is on my watch, but your watch might be 2
No,
minutes
it's-
ahead of my.
It's exactly 1 o'clock, Chair.
Oh, okay. Well, on mine too, it's exactly 1 o'clock. We will take the lunch adjournment, and we'll resume at 2. We adjourn.
So 18.